Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending where you are in the world today. We're absolutely delighted to welcome such a vast and diverse global audience to our startup virtual panel event on Innovating with AI, where we will spend the next 60 minutes hearing from our enterprising panelists on their own personal and innovative AI journeys. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping points. Throughout the webinar, you can submit your questions to us. You can see on the control panel the questions tab. If you pop your questions in there, we will have some time at the end to go over them, where you will also have the opportunity to speak to the panelists directly. If you have any other issues with sound or visuals, please let us know through the chat function as well. If you want to follow us on social media, we are on Twitter at OVHcloud_UK and on LinkedIn. We will also be recording today's session, and at the end of the webinar, we will send out a recording of the presentations. So you'll get that via the email address that you registered with us. And finally, if you have any other questions, you can email those to us at event@ovhcloud.com. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to the Northern Europe Startup Program Manager, Philip Marais.
Thank you, Ronak, and yes, a big welcome to our awesome international audience today. Very welcome to have you here. And yes, as Ronak said, I'm the Startup Program Leader in UK, Ireland, and Northern Europe, and I'm joined by my colleague Farid, who's the Startup Program Leader in the DACH region. We're very pleased to welcome you to this Startup Program event, keynote, and panel, Innovating with AI, Understanding the Journey. Our role in the Startup Program is to facilitate this journey with the cloud easier for those who are in our program, the startups and the scale-ups. And we do this in various ways. We run events like this. We offer free cloud credits, so 10,000 euro for startups and up to 100,000 euro for scale-ups. And then also one-on-one tech support time to solve your tech challenges quickly. Today we have a special offer of 150 euro voucher to try out our AI training product, which is available for all attendees of today. And we'll be sending you more details about this after the event, and also more details about the startup program and how you can sign up if you're interested. And that voucher is available for not only startup program members, but any attendee. But yes, let's get on with the event. So the agenda for today is, first of all, we're going to have our keynote address, which is about 20 minutes, and that'll be followed by our panel, the startup panel, for another 20 minutes, and then Q&A with questions from you as the audience. So I'd like to now introduce our keynote speaker. He is Sherin Mathew, CEO and founder of AI Tech North, Chief AI Officer and AI Success Manager. And just reading from his bio, Sherin is an established thought leader within AI and data, all right, and specializing in AI readiness, AI strategies, mentoring and guiding leaders with cloud adoption. He's the CEO and founder of the largest Northern AI community, AI Tech North, and has been recognized in Data IQ Top 100 in 2021 for his work to bridge the divide and evangelize and democratize AI across the Northern powerhouse over the years. Through AI Tech North, Sherin also runs a global knowledge sharing digital platform called Innovation Exchange, and is democratizing accountable innovations through an open, public, accountable AI framework called Public Intelligence. So yeah, Sherin, we're very pleased to have you with us today. We're looking forward to your address. And so I'm going to hand over to you now to start that address.
Thank you so much, Philip. Thanks for the great introduction. And it's a pleasure to be here to share and democratize AI with you all. What a great effort and event by OVHcloud. So congratulations for putting this together, and great to see so many enthusiastic startups and leaders joining us today. So without further ado, and I'm just going to skip my intro because Philip has done a fantastic job. And what we do at a very high level as well. So we are very much focused on democratizing knowledge through innovation exchange, democratizing ethics through public intelligence, which is an open platform for all And also we advise in a very lean fashion for startups to get started on the right foot with AI. And of course, I speak as well. So why are we here today? We're here to talk about AI, and we all know AI has been there for decades, since 1950s, when the term AI was coined by scientist John McCarthy in a science conference in Dartmouth College. From that point onwards, we saw machine learning flourish, deep learning flourish over decades, and we saw a winter as well in between, machine learning trying to beat Grand Chess Master Garry Kasparov through machine learning model built by IBM, Deep Blue. And then we saw a winter because everyone couldn't afford a supercomputer, right? It was not accessible. But around 2010, we saw deep learning flourish and technology rapidly evolve. And I think we saw something really fascinating. We saw a convergence of various technology. We saw convergence of data. Data was proliferating, growing at exponential scale. We saw technology rapidly evolving and processing things faster. So we saw blockchain, we saw, quantum technology rising, and everything able to operate and process, petabytes of data, rapidly. We saw another interesting trend, which is intelligence became a fashion, from smart devices, smart watches, and smart cars. We started seeing intelligence automation as a new trend to make things better, faster, and commercially viable. All of this was also catalyzed by high-speed communication and access to wider internet and faster internet as well. So everything became as a service. And byproduct of this, I think, was something inevitable, which we call today artificial intelligence. And I want to focus, this is not real artificial intelligence. This is narrow artificial intelligence, or a weak or a simple version of artificial intelligence, where you have a simple input going into a model, giving a simple output. You put image, process that image, it detects the object. You put in voice, it detects the voice, understands either the emotion, the text, or the context. So simple, yet super powerful, and we could do amazing things with it. So we've seen a new trend, we've seen a new gold rush, and we can see the businesses have gone through this paradigm shift. So businesses which had applications are now extracting and generating data with these applications, thanks to digitalizing all of this. So we are now generating data, lots of data, right? Data that doesn't even exist, augmented analytics, all of this is happening. Now, when all of this happens, it becomes pivotal that we sort of make sense out of this. So we're seeing a new trend of having data science capability, analytics capability, and AI capability in general. Today, businesses are not asking, give me data. They're asking, give me insights and intelligence. And there has been a paradigm shift in how businesses are using their data today. Now, to give you an example, 2 decades ago, people will be after, give me the data for this month and previous month. And that could be 3 million previous month and 4 million this month, the sales total. That is information. Okay, so we saw a trend of data becoming information. But now, what businesses are after is, if it was 3 million last month and 4 million this month, what did I do in between? This invisible insight is intelligence, and that's what AI enables you to access all of this insights. So that is the new trend. Your boss is not going to come and ask you for data. They will ask you for intelligence. So this results into a very interesting question. What is my AI use case? So if you spot something like, I want to empower my employees or anyone with technology, there's a potential for AI use case there if you have infrastructure and data. If you want to engage with your existing customer, there's a potential to introduce chatbot capability. If you want to enhance efficiency of your current process, you are looking for potential machine learning, predictive, or recommendation model to sort of enhance the current capability. If you're looking to optimize your current operations and business process or supply chain, for example, you're looking for, again, machine learning models, anomaly detection to find the leak, find the wastage, and also optimize the areas that you think could be fixed or corrected using predictive capability. Ultimately, you're transforming the system that you currently have. So you might be building something completely from scratch. But this leads into quite an interesting question, or series of questions. What do I do? How do I get started? So the simple answer to that is always start with a problem. Do you have a problem with your current process, technology, or engagement with client? And ask the question, why? Why should I do this? And then really see what can you do to answer these questions or solve these problems. So there are many ways to do that, which is go with the predictive route, and go with migrate to a new platform or a new capability, or build completely from scratch. Last but not least, how do you maintain and manage all of this and create a sustainable and ethical solution going forward? Okay, so there's many ways to get to your solution, but obviously you've got to have expertise, architecture knowledge, and also a good executive strategy to achieve this. So talking about strategy, what are the key ingredients of strategy? I'm not going to give a strategy lesson, but these few bullet points really helps you sort of identify what you need to get started with AI. You need to have a long-term vision. You should solve a long-term problem. If you're trying to solve a short-term problem, it may not be the right thing to do. You got to manage the culture and manage the change, because technology is the easy part, culture and change is the difficult part. And this is where most of the projects fail if you do not manage the culture. Have a blueprint plan. So this is project planning, project and program planning, and take a strategic approach. Now, strategic approach could be two ways. A top-down approach where business leaders drive the portfolio and the vision of the company. The bottom-up approach is where you can have your technology and your internal skills driving the AI innovation. So if you have tons of data, on social media, and if you have, Python skills or Java skills or SQL skills, you leverage those skills and work on those platforms using the aligned AI technology on that platform. So yeah, this answers the next question. So how do you choose the technology? Choose technology based on your strength, whatever works for you, because every platform, every service provider has AI capability or can adapt to AI capability. There's open source capabilities as well. And also there is a simple, medium, and complex way of doing things, from a low code to hard code way of doing things. Okay. So yeah, so strategy plays a key role. And this is where you probably need not just a leader, you also need a designer, architect, and of course, a data scientist. Leadership is the most important ingredient for any AI strategy. So leadership is the one that ensures people are aligned to the vision. They can invest in the right people, technology, and the change process. They can work through the strategy, and also, they make sure, ethics and process and all of these is followed. So leadership really plays a key role in delivering a new intelligent empowerment, pretty much a new digital transformation. So as I mentioned, there's a couple of ways of doing AI or achieving AI capabilities. So there's a low code or using pre-existing framework and pre-built AI. You can just go straight away and start empowering your organization through intelligent empowerment. And this is where you can try get fairly decent accuracy through your AI models or solutions. And once you feel like you're happy with it and you want to up the game and improve the efficiency and accuracy, you take it a notch up. So you start modernizing and investing a bit more time and energy and embedding AI into your application. So a good example of modernizing is, you've probably seen Amazon, eBay, Netflix. They all were a box standard application. Then they started adding recommendation features to it. So this is one way you can modernize your existing application and add some AI capability to it. If you want to transform your business process completely, this is a good example for health tech. So health tech is completely using from no AI to suddenly they're using diagnostic AI and scanning and all that stuff. So they are creating from scratch high accuracy and business critical processes. So you need to have a full-fledged process team and of course the data in place to do so. So it's really important to have executive thinking here. So what does that really mean? So this, I think, slide really explains, why we need executive thinking. Leaders need to see what solution is out there to solve the long-term problem, and that's what it means. You got to think long-term. Otherwise, you'll end up just trying to fix the short-term problems, and that does not work. So you need to align your people, processes, and organization with your long-term vision to achieve a solution with AI. And also, it's important to manage the expectations as well. So quickly going through them, we've got to realize that AI is narrow. It's only going to solve small, simple problem. It's not a crystal ball to answer the big long-term questions. Second thing is, it is reactive. It is reacting to your existing data. If your data has problems, bias, or has not seen certain type of data, it will not be able to manage that situation or exception. If traveler's car has never seen a cow, it will actually hit it. So if that data set doesn't exist, we got a problem, and you got to manage that. So remember, it is not predictive 100% of the time. It is actually reactive. Last but not least, you got to deliver something which manages the purpose, the real purpose. There's no point building a dancing robot or augmented reality newsreader, because there's already capabilities out there that's delivering these capabilities, and you've got to be ethical as well. So purpose plays a really important role. So think twice before you start implementing AI and see if you're actually solving a unique problem. I'm just going to touch base on 7 barriers. So we all know there are challenges with AI, but I think knowing them well in advance really gives you a cutting edge advantage as well. So really try to understand and work through these 7 barriers if you can. And these are obviously self-explanatory, so I won't go through them. And also remember, one barrier which I haven't mentioned is the code or the data science capability. So it's not just, hey, I got a data scientist and this is going to solve my problem. Coding is probably, I would say, 10% of the AI value chain. There's a lot of strategy, a lot of management, and there's various other debts that you've got to manage. So yeah, don't just think that data science capability can get you an AI solution. You got to think bigger and wider than that. Lastly, let me close this with a quick summary of how we can get started in a quick and simple way. So I have my own framework built through AI Tech North, which is Simple AI. So in Simple AI, we say, let's start strategically with a problem, then see what can we do to innovate. So once you know the problem, you choose the options. Am I going to go with the chatbot capability, or am I going to go with the anomaly detection capability? And then, ensure you understand the business requirements. So this is where you empathize with your users and stakeholders, and embed ethics as well in your process. Like I said, planning, which is the blueprint, is really important, and to ensure you have the right resources and timeline in place. Be bold enough to experiment and explore and fail, because that's the only way you can achieve a solid AI solution. Then the second last step is to be adaptable. Always try to work with the latest framework, work with ethics and regulations, and be ready to adapt. Don't create a very hard-coded AI solution. Be there in a way that you can be flexible about it as well. Last but not least, don't be scared to improvise, improve, and constantly correct yourself, and go back to the people stage where you look back and ask your stakeholders and business users and be ethical and close that loop consistently. So yeah, from our next step perspective, I think my only piece of advice is don't focus too much on technology, focus on the principles, be an applicationist, because once you know in principle, you should be able to apply this continuously going forward. And I think that's it from me. As Philip mentioned, we do a lot of stuff. So this is all our website links. So if you're interested, you can get in touch with either one of them. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sherin, for the great keynote and the framework of how to get started with AI and choosing the right ingredients. We will now deep dive into our panel discussion with founders of AI companies, touching upon real-life adoption of this technology. First of all, I'd like to thank all panelists for joining us. Let's kick off with a short introduction. Audrey, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you very much. So my name is Audrey Gaymann. I'm the Chief Artificial Officer of TOffeeAM. So we are a software company specialized in design for additive manufacturing. We come from Imperial College London. We were a spin-out and incorporated in 2019. And since then, we have been working with big businesses to redesign the engineering component. We are using AI inside our software tool. So we are using both generative design on machine learning, on deep learning to improve the efficiency of the software so that industries can have the results faster. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Duc?
Thank you. My name is Duc Trin. I'm the Chief Product Officer of Digitaika. What we do is that we created automated video. It's a platform where user can upload and share presentations, document, audio recording as online video. What we do is that we use AI to understand the content automatically to transform existing documents into animated and interactive video. So we use audio analysis, we use image analysis, and so on to apply the fourth dimension into static documents.
Thank you very much, Duc. Marc-Angelo.
Thank you, Ray. So my name is Marc-Angelo. I'm one of the founders of Policy-Insider. And Policy-Insider is a company that was really founded around the idea of bringing AI to public policy. Public policy is everything that includes government affairs, working with institutions. It's a heavy people business. It's people that have contacts, it's people that have knowledge, that have insights, and we wanted to use AI to break up all these boundaries by creating a platform that gives you direct access to policy or public policy development documents across language barriers, across your zone of comfort, all in one place.
Thank you. So yeah, from the first introduction, we can already see the varied use cases AI can be used with, from video automation to policy documents. So Duc, can you tell us about more about how you reached the decision that your product really requires AI, and what were your expectations at first?
Yes, typically the value proposition that we wanted to bring to the market was to simplify the creation of video without the need for video editing. So we wanted to leverage the existing content that everybody has, like PowerPoint presentations, PDF, and so on. And we understood very clearly that we needed to understand what was inside the document, the level of information, what was the intent of the author to bring the animation to the document. So very early we decided to go to cognitive AI, image analysis, video analysis, audio analysis, to extract the information and to use that to create the video afterwards. So it was very early on that we used that for our platform.
So from very early on, you made the decision to embed AI as a core strategy moving forward to really develop your business all around. AI.
It's for automation, basically. Yes.
Audrey, is that something you can also comply with, that you really started from the very beginning, or was it more that as you developed your product, you saw as AI as a good way to make things more efficient?
That we have both aspects actually in the startup, because we have developed two types of tool, AI tool. So the first one was the core idea of the startup, what got us started, which was having a computer do engineering components for you without needing the human knowledge, a human input on it. So the system had to learn by itself to redesign components without us as human putting a direction towards which type of design we wanted. So the system would just use a mathematical algorithm to build the optimum design. And that's what started the startup. That started with this algorithm. And as we started to work more closely with industries, we started to have a large amount of data set building up on requests from customers. These requests were, for example, okay, you have this tool, it's taking time. Is it possible with all your data to also speed up the process of obtaining the final results? Because we were starting to have all this data set building up, it was a possibility to develop a new tool, a new AI tool, to speed up the full process we had already in place inside the startup. So that's like when we started to move towards like a more machine learning, deep learning system, where like it would be able to use all the cloud services, for example, where we could build extra data set, a large amount of data set to feed inside this machine learning system so that our customer could get the results faster than our competitors or what's actually on the market.
So I understand correctly that the emphasis really on having good data sets. Would you, Marc-Angelo, say that you had some sort of challenge around getting the right data sets at the beginning and really analyzing and segmenting all of that?
Yes and no. So what you have to know is that when you look at public policy databases from parliaments, usually the data is annotated. So it tells you this is about healthcare, and this is about transport, and of course now there's a lot of things about COVID, which is a new category. But we trained our data with documents from the German Bundestag. So we used roughly 25,000 annotated documents, and then we wanted to take this annotation data to the French Parliament. And what we saw there is, and we knew this, but we didn't think it would make such a difference, is that actually in French politics you have topics that you don't have in Germany. So for instance, everything that deals with overseas territories, which is our own policy area in France that the Germans don't have just historically. And so how do we deal with this kind of data? So we had to spend a lot of time in aligning our different data sets to the different regions we're covering. But generally also what you can see is this garbage in, garbage out. Basically, if your data is not well annotated and consistently annotated, then you will see this at the end in the results. So we did also have the issue that at the beginning we had 2 junior colleagues, verifying the annotations and not following the same principles across the annotations. So this is certainly a learning that we had, was make sure that your annotated data is really consistent.
So is this an experience, Audrey or Duke, you can share as well? Or you experienced it as well?
Go ahead.
For me, yeah. So for the data set, the thing is mostly the data set were built with our customer. So we were not creating all the data. So it was always a request from a customer, and then with an agreement with them, we will use their data to build larger data set, and from there on feed them inside the AI. But obviously, because in our case, we have to make sure that we are building data sets which are based on what's actually needed by the industry. So if we were to start to build data sets which are unrelated to the need, then you're just wasting resources. On you're also including biases inside your data set. So we had to make sure that everything we were actually using would be useful on the long term, whereas the need to discuss with the customer.
In our case, we are using existing data sets and pre-built AI most of the time, so we don't have that challenge. But the challenge is about the same: that if we have an unexpected result, if we have a negative result, then that's the problem, because it's not like a traditional algorithm when you go to the code, you go to the line that is a problem, you make conditions and you fix the problem. If you have an unexpected result, a negative result, then you have to retrain the whole network, and you have to go back, and sometimes you don't have the data sets to correct it. So that's very the real challenge of AI. It's not traditional algorithm. It's like a kid, if he doesn't learn very well, then you have to go send him back to school, and it takes time. So that's how you have to manage the expectations from your product.
I think that really ties into Sherin what you said earlier as well in your presentation, that it's really about experimenting as well and failing at times too, and then starting really at the beginning again to retrain your whole model to get the expected results, right?
Yeah.
So Sherin was also talking about different levels of how to integrate AI capabilities into your business models, more from a more incremental start, but then always keep building it. Is that something you are looking into as well? Where would you stand? Are you thinking of extending AI as more transformational technology within your business?
To me, go ahead.
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, I've been working 15 years in a consultancy, and what you see is that you grow people, and you train them with easier tasks, research, analysis, and then you build them into consultants, and that are just by their knowledge and their experience able to provide you with more information, with more value. And we're taking very much the same approach actually in our product. So that we want to make sure that they do the first task really well, like data aggregation, data presentation, and then adding step by step new capabilities. So for instance, we're not just adding sentiment analysis. We have a social media dashboard where we track policymakers, and we add that in our release that's coming up, I think, next week. And then we're already thinking about what's the next thing that we can do, and what is relevant, what is not, what do our users ask for. So we listen a lot to our users and say, is it possible to create this or that kind of analysis, this kind of dashboard? And certainly we get a lot of requests when it comes to summarization, specific analysis. Don't tell me everything that is in this document, just tell me what's relevant to me or in relation to a certain policy area. So yes, definitely. I think you have always, once you have launched or are about to launch a new feature, you have already to be thinking about the next one, just to keep the momentum. I think there's also a clear expectation by the user that it gets more and more. You can't hold.
Thank you. Do you share a similar experience, Doc?
Yeah, in our case, we are always excited by what's coming up in the AI field, and we want to integrate the maximum of feature into our product to better understand the product, or even to generate new stuff with Gaymann, for instance. But there are two metrics that we look at very closely. The first one is what the AI can do, but the other one, very important too, is the computing footprint of the AI. As we are a cloud platform, everything has to scale, and if it's taking too much computing power, even if the result is great, then it's not for us right now. But the good thing is that if you wait enough time, then this footprint goes smaller, and then we can integrate that into a cloud environment much more easily. So these are the two things that we look at when we want to integrate. a new capability into our platform.
So how do you strike that balance of getting it right?
Well, it's an economic problem. Typically, if you need 2 GPUs for running one process, if you have 10,000 customers, then it doesn't make sense to integrate that to our platform. We have to wait, and usually people work on that, and the code gets smaller, and then we can put that in. We can run in a very scalable way.
So it's about balancing the technology at hand and also the business needs of the customers and users that are using it as well.
Yes.
So what if looking at all the challenges that you had and getting the bias right, striking all these balances, what would be a good piece of advice that you would give to other businesses about implementing AI? Like what should they really get right at the beginning so that they have a success at the end? Audrey, do you want to?
I would say for us in our case, from like our experience, it would be first to make sure that you're building an AI which is going to be useful. So there's a need for it, or not just because what you see sometimes in industries is people are going to use AI just for publicity, but it's not very useful for some of them. Like, well, how does it decide to use it? So when we decided to orient ourselves towards AI is because there was request at some point, like the latest one we have is because we had requests for customer. So we want to speed it up. So how can you speed up the process? And then you realize you have data set, and then you realize you have AI tools. So that's where everything comes together. It's not just for the sake of using AI. So we did build because there was a need from the industries. But also what I would say is stay up to date to the latest development in AI, because sometimes you might use tools that are working well for what you need, but you have newer tools that are coming on the market or are on research on being published and can even improve further your current product. So stay open and always up to date, because your competitors are also probably going to use this tool. So that's always like a balance to strike on developing a tool and then also making sure that this tool is always progressing and not just static.
Yeah, I can certainly agree to that. I think it's making the choice about the right AI and where you can really create value, because at some point, if you're just doing it for visibility, your users will recognize that, and then you lose a lot of credibility when it comes to really bring a solution. And what I'd like to add though is I think you have to be communicating about the expectations to your users, because there is not so much experience in actually using AI experience on the large scale, and so certain people believe, or certain users believe, that it will be able to do everything and that they don't have to think about what they're seeing and the result they're getting, and others will be very critical, like AI doesn't work at all, and it's how can it be better than what I have been doing for the last 20 years? And I think explaining that the AI is a component that is, at least in our product, is supposed to make your life easier, not going to replace you, at least not in the short term maybe, is certainly something that is very important, because your AI will most probably at some point do something that wasn't expected or give a result that isn't 100% correct. And if you're going out with the promise that you say the sentiment analysis on the tweets is always correct, and you just don't recognize sarcasm, for instance, in a tweet, then you look stupid. Whereas if you tell your user, look, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is where we're going to, it takes time, but we're confident we're getting there, and what we have is already pretty good, and we hope that you'll enjoy it. And I think this is really important, this display and this explanation. And when you get this, you actually get a lot of feedback from people like, oh, it works really well, I have noticed this, maybe you can improve that. And I think this is the good communication around the AI, not making it like something sacred that you shouldn't talk about.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think AI is maybe for a lot of people quite mystic, but being really transparent about how you use it and the errors that it could give is, I think, very, very good tip. Doug, do you have any final words to add for our audience?
Oh yes, I just wanted
Nice.
to stress that point, because when you design your product, you have a choice to position AI in different parts of your product. You can put it very early on in your process as an input, or you can use AI at the very end of your process when you are close to your user interaction. Typically, this is what Marc-Angelo said. If you use AI in that part, then you can have a lower rate of reliability, because you can suggest a solution that may not be right for the user, but in the end, it's always the human brain or the human person who makes the arbitrage, who takes the decision. If you are very early on in the process, if you rely on AI to make decisions, then that's very tricky. You have to have a high level of reliability there, because then the user doesn't interact with your process. And if the result is not good, for instance, if you detect a cancer cell when there's no cancer cell, then that's very bad outcome. So you have to be very careful where you put your AI, and you can be very, very innovative as soon as it's just a suggestion. When you're enhancing the decision of the user, you can suggest, go ahead, put as much as AI as possible there. But when it's very early on, then be cautious.
Awesome, thank you. So I think in sum, it's really about finding a need, applying the AI technology to that need, experimenting, not being afraid to fail until you get it right, and yeah, also really communicating in a transparent way to really set the expectations between the technology and the results it can give. Awesome, thank you. So I'd like to give the audience some time to ask some questions. Philip, do we have any questions?
Thanks, Ray. Thanks again to Sherin and to the panel for a very interesting discussion. We are starting to get some questions in from the audience. So, audience, there's two ways you can ask your question. You can do it in the question tab, and we've already got some questions coming in. I have now unmuted the audience as well. That means that you also have to unmute yourself if you want to speak. But the process we're going to do that is you need to put up your hand, and then we can field your questions once you've put up your hand. But yeah, I'm going to start now with we've got a question around skills. And so the question was posed around, I've got these skills, and this was a PhD, applied maths, what other skills do I need? And I think, that's an interesting question from the person who's out there who wants to find a role in this industry. But I'd also like to look at that question from the point of view of, I've got a startup and I'm getting into AI, and what skills do I need to have in my team to make sure that I'm going to be able to deliver? And I think, some of that discussion about having the right skills came up. I know, Marc-Angelo, you made a comment on that. But Sherin, maybe you can start with this question around skills. In your experience, I don't mind which side you focus on, if you want to look at both on the the employee looking for a job and from the startup point of view, making sure they deliver, world-class AI. What would your recommendations be?
Yeah, so my journey has been quite interesting, because when I was doing my undergrad, I was building robots with VC++ programming and assembly language programming, and trying to make it intelligent. And I was like, how do I actually apply this? And got into the world of IT, cloud, and everything. So I think the journey really helps a lot. If you have the technical core background, it's absolutely valuable, because you got to realize building an AI solution is like building an Eiffel Tower, because everyone's trying to take the highest point, take the advantage, and see the world from the highest point, right? So I think knowing the nitty-gritty, the details technically, really gives a massive advantage. So if you have a PhD, maths background, computer science background, really helpful, because that helps you architect the right solution. Other challenge that I faced when I was working and trying to implement data and AI in NHS, healthcare sector, 5-6 years ago, was culture and strategy. So this is why you need the balance. So just being technical sometimes doesn't get you that far. Just being a leader doesn't get you that far. So you've got to have a balance of being technical, being a designer, architect, and also a leader. So having these three things configured or managed in your role really helps, because technology can take you only to a certain point, but having a well-rounded overview and understanding of business requirement, ethics, and where you need to get to really gives you a strategic advantage. So to answer that question is balance it out, try and experiment and fail. Don't be fearless to try any platform, any technology, and learn how they work and how they fail as well, because it's not the success stories that will take you forward. I think it's the failures and the lessons learned that takes you forward. So that's my quick advice on that.
Thanks, Sherin. Audrey, can you also tackle that question, particularly around the question around what coding skills do I need? I might have the kind of the higher level understanding, but in the nuts and bolts, in terms of you employing somebody now today, what kind of skills would you like them to have on their CV so that they can get really going immediately?
Well, for us, it's a bit special because we started more for aerospace industries, so CFD software. So when we started to work on AI, it was for integrated this system in our current system. So we do look at a lot, because we're a software company at coding skills, how much experience you have, what you have done with it. So we tend to focus on more like C++, Python type of coding, also because they have libraries which are available. So to help you when you start to develop the tools for the software. For me, my background is a bit mixed up because I did a PhD in aerospace industries and I'm working now in AI. So it was incorporated slowly as the year went by inside my work. So it's from when you have you're curious enough, you can learn new skills, because at the end of the day, it's how much you can do by yourself. Are you interested in what you're doing? Can you develop the new skill? Are you going to be curious to see this type of tools, or are you going to be curious about this type of technology? That's how we work more or less inside the team.
Thanks, Audrey. Got another interesting question around accessing data. Kim, I don't know if you want to actually speak that out. I see you did put up your hand. Otherwise, I can address this question to the panel.
Yes, hi. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. So I'm hoping to build a startup in the health tech space to, I guess, make ADHD coaching more accessible. So ADHD is attention hyperactive deficit disorder. But at the moment, I'm struggling to find, well, the data is available on Facebook chat forums, etc., where people go on and ask questions about their symptoms, etc., and get suggested solutions, etc. But that's not really ethical to scrape. So I guess my question is, where do I find, or where do people go and find data sets that's ethical, especially when it comes to health related tech, etc.?
I don't know if you want to address that to any specific panel member. Otherwise, I'd suggest Marc-Angelo. Could you tackle that question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for this question. And maybe as a background, I'm also involved in a healthcare AI company. So this is actually something I can relate to. And having worked almost 15 years in public policy in healthcare as well, what we could see is that the universities basically got requests for the data sets. They have a lot of annotated data. They have study data. So I would really go for universities and studies, look on PubMed and Google Scholars for publications where you might be able to access structured data. Actually, then it's even structured. And
there's
I'm
also
this is there is already a race for that. I mean, sounds like a really interesting challenge, and I could see any doctor that I know had a registry on anything got dozens of requests on how can we use this data for AI. So in dermatology and in whatever area you're looking at. So definitely that would be my first way to go.
Sorry, so Google Scholar. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Google
Scholar,
and then reaching out to these people.
Look, you want to say something?
Yeah, there's also another way to do it is to build maybe a more simple app that is using traditional algorithm, right? To build your algorithm the traditional way, and then through that gather information that people are inputting into it, and from that build your AI with your own data set. You know, the way like Audrey did typically. You do your traditional algorithm with conditional testing and so on, and then once you have enough users, then you can get your own data set from which you can build your AI. So maybe sometimes it may not be the case for you, but sometimes going to AI is not like the first strategy you need to take. You need to first address the need, then you get the data, then you can go to AI. This is also a way to get the data set.
Just in terms of that question around accessing of data, Duc, you mentioned the whole, that you were kind of using a pre-built model. I guess in terms of maybe a bit of a roundabout way of answering that question, this could be an option where you're using a pre-built model. I'd be interested to hear your opinions and the panel in general around, is that a good starting point? Do you have to build your own algorithm? What are the scenarios where a pre-built model is a good option, whereas you have to start with your own algorithm?
Well, to me, we should always start with something that exists to see and evaluate from that. If you can improve, then fine. If you can, you should not try to do from scratch when something exists out there. That's the first thing for sure.
Yeah, I can add my thoughts on opinion to it. I say take a risk-based approach because when you go with pre-built, you don't know much about how the algorithm is written, the performance, behavior, and everything about the model in specific. And it also depends on your use case and the purpose. So if you're going into healthcare with pre-built with low accuracy, the risk is high. So I think if you need to balance here, right? If the risk is high, what is the scope of my application here? Is it just to experiment to see, does this approach solve the problem or give me the results? 75% accuracy of finding ADHD, yes or no? Okay, I can go forward and work more with it. Okay, I can take it a step up. So I think it's more like how you work around the risk, the accuracy, and how do you expand the scope as well. So you got to think in multi-dimension here when you start taking your pre-built capabilities into some mission critical or business critical solutions or applications. Yeah.
No, thanks. Any other feedback on that one before we move on? All right. Yeah, I just thought, one of the points you brought up, Sherin, was adaptability, and again, I guess we're touching on it in some of these questions. I wondered if you had, as startups, any interesting examples of how you really had to adapt when you were applying AI in your business. Audrey, I don't know if you've got a good example there.
For adaptability of the AI.
Adaptability, you're applying AI, but you realize, you were going in a certain direction, but you had to, based on feedback from your user or other changes, you required to adapt in order to really apply AI in a way that was applicable to your customers.
That's a bit of a tricky question in the way that sometimes what the customer wants is not what the next customer would like to use. So we do have a core system for the AI. And after you can play around with the data set and then start to modify the AI you're using. Obviously, AI are very good to do a specific task, and they're not so good when you start to make the task very complicated. So you might start to diverse and have multiple AI depending on what are the expectations of your client or what they're searching for. So that's what we start to have, for example, in the startup. We don't have a single AI for every task or customer ask. We have different AI serving different purposes. And each AI is fed with its own data set for different applications. Because just to give an example, but we use AI in a structural solver. So in the structural solver, it will reproduce a structural design. It will make the design for us faster. But we also use AI inside turbulence model. And for the turbulence model, it's a different type of problem. So you won't use the same AI or the same data set because the application is different and was requested by a different customer. So it's like you have to think, not just feed everything in a single one, but you think when it starts to be too complicated and you start to have too much applications coming in, start to think what kind of AI is the best for each purpose, and then specialize each AI for this purpose, because it would be great for one task, but not all of them.
All right, thanks. We've got a few more questions from the audience I'd just like to get to because we are running out of time. So the market release of a myriad of hardware technologies to accelerate AI computing. What is your view on this? Are you able to follow the trend and take advantage of the innovation? If not, what do you expect from the semi-tech? I'm not sure exactly what that means, but around hardware technology accelerating AI computing. Sherin, have you got any views on how to best get the best use of hardware?
Best use of hardware. Okay, that's an interesting one. What we did for most of our AI solution and data solution deliveries is we used what we had resource-wise, and sometimes you may have hardware which obviously configuring for a data science environment could be painful to run certain libraries, certain code, certain model. Obviously, there's demand as well for the CPU and performance as well. So there's an element of how do you balance that as well. So there is a possibility that you could go cloud and just go deploy a data science virtual machine that is ready packaged to run your data science capability, experiment, train the model. Once you're happy with that model, and you know what configuration works for you, and if you have your on-prem infrastructure and hardware, that's what you do. You map that. You bring the capability of cloud down to your earth or your on-prem infrastructure. So that's one clever way to sort of try, experiment, start small, work on cloud data science environment, and then bring it down. So this is where you can maximize your on-prem infrastructure capability. I'm a big fan of having on-prem capability because it is right there next to you and you are in full control of that. So if you're really working on a business critical application, that's a good way. Experiment on cloud, bring it down to your on-prem environment. But by experimenting on cloud, you can also do performance test and also stress test and see what is the optimum requirements that you need for your hardware on-prem as well. So hopefully that gives you some answer.
Yeah, great. And just from an OVHcloud point of view, we are always testing out the latest and greatest technologies and offering those onto your customers. I think you need to work with your cloud provider as well and make sure that they are providing the kinds of hardware that you need to to meet the demands of your particular application. All right, I think we've got a final question here. We are a startup in the film industry looking for solutions to annotate the shots of documentary film assets. I'm interested in knowing the roadmap between using ready-made solutions from cloud providers to build your own AI models. So I guess it's a question around, what's available there in terms of tools, and you know, what would your recommendations be about that? Duke, question for you.
Sorry, what was the they want to annotate? Sorry,
So they a startup in the film industry looking for a solution to annotate the shots of documentary film assets.
Oh, yeah.
And interested in sort of existing tools that are out there that could help them with that.
Oh yeah, there are a lot of existing tools to detect objects, for instance, to detect persons, to segment the images into video. So there are a lot of tools out there. Obviously, the main cloud provider that provide APIs for that, but you can build your own library. You can have also libraries in Python using TensorFlow to run that in your own cloud or in your own computer. So annotation of video is pretty straightforward today. You don't have to do it again from scratch.
No, well, thank you for that. And yeah, we are out of time now. So just a very big thank you to the panel, Sherin for your address, and audience for your great participation in terms of questions. Much appreciated. As I said earlier, we will be sending out an email to all those who are attending today with, first of all, the recording of the session. We'll also include that voucher that I mentioned for trying out our AI training, which is using our GPUs, and then details about the startup program and how you can sign up if you're interested. The email will also include email addresses for the startup program leaders in the different clusters around the world, so you can contact the person for your region if you're interested. And then we're also running a pitch contest that you might be interested in. The URL is on the screen. The closing date is the 6th of June for videos pitch submissions. So check out the details in the email, and we hope to see you at upcoming events and also your submission to that competition. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.